Okay. Today we're going to deal with the Mary Smoss part of the sentence, also called Mary to Logou, in ancient Greek. Okay, let's see. For example, yesterday I walked quite lethargically too, even more slowly. Okay, this sentence there is intelligible. We understand it. We know what it means. But if you take a closer look to it, out of these words, you can only find one verb, which is walked, the simple past in the first person. The rest of the words are adverbs. Interesting. There was a lot of debate and discussion when they started to think about these things. Say, okay, when I utter a sentence, what are the internal parts of the sentences? And what is the syntax of the sentence, of the words? How I am using the words, in which location within the sentence I have to put the words I'm using when I utter a sentence. Okay. It was a great deal of discussion and debate and arguments and argumentation about what's a verb, what's an adverb, what's a noun, what's a conjunction, what's an article. Okay, they started to inquire deeply into the very sentence. Okay, so they came to the conclusion, an early conclusion, that the sentence is a combination, synthesis of name and predicate, right? But name and predicate were generic words, not the words, not the concept that we know it today. Okay, name and predicate. You only need the name and predicate. But later on, they started to inquire a little bit deeper into it. Okay, so as a result, name and predicate are parts of the sentence. Mere tu logu. Name and predicate, the two big groups within a sentence. So a basic sentence division implies on one side name, onoma, plus verb, rima. Okay. You see, for example, man on the screen. Man. The word per se, this onoma, means something, but there is neither ontological implication, to be or not to be. We don't know, nothing. We're just saying man. But there is no true or false. There is no assertion or negation. So when I say man or dog or sheep, these words, this onoma, means something, but there is no compromise, let's say. There is something missing. So to achieve logos, to achieve a sentence, to achieve a judgment, there must be a combination of onoma plus rima. Onoma plus rima. Okay, and let's see what we mean about onoma and rima, the two big groups within the sentence. You see, up on the top, onoma, They call it own names, such as Socrates, Pablo, Julio, Paul, okay? Common names, man, dog, okay? Names that comprises many individuals within them. An adjective. At the very beginning, an adjective was considered to be an onomat, to be a name, okay? It was comprised within the same class, with the same group. But we know today that an adjective is an attribute, a qualification of a noun, right? Okay. Rima was considered a verb itself or a verb plus a predicate. So the verb plus what comes next. If I say, for example, Socrates walks, we have an onomat plus a rima, a plain rima, let's call it. But if I say Socrates walks to the agora, we have the rima, which comprises everything that comes after the verb. Walks to the agora. Okay, so everything, all these things, all these words are considered to be a rima. All right. So onoma, there on the screen, onoma is the one that takes action in accordance to the time that rima indicates. Again, onoma itself means something, but there is no compromise. There is no yes or no, no true or false, or no assertion or negation. There is something missing again, and that missing thing is the rima. And that rima indicates action and indicates time. Okay, so after much of debate and discussion and argumentation of an inquiry into the logos, into the sentences, they started to find out the different merismos, the different parts of the sentences, right? Some of them are still in accordance to what we know them today, but some of them are not quite the same. But anyway, this is the canonic list of merismos, right? So onoma, rima, arthron, which is the article, believe it or not, in some ancient writing, and still in some languages, they don't use the article, okay? So the article was a development, a late development into some languages. Article, antonymia, the pronouns, you know, I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they, okay? The pronouns which replace the names or the onomat. Methoge, participle. There is a struggle there on its origin. Does it come from the nouns or does it come from verbs? Are its roots nominal or verbal? Okay, this is on the participle. And mesotes, which is an adverb, this is in between verb and name. If we bear in mind the sentence of the previous picture, we have adverbs such as yesterday and something quite different, which is the lethargically, or slowly, or even. Words like these, which belong to the universe of adverbs, but it looks like there is nothing in common between them. So yesterday looks like more than a noon. In other words, it looks like its roots are nominal, and lethargically and slowly looks like their roots comes from a verb, right? So imagine all the discussion and all the time they spent debating on this, on the limits of the adverbs. And sometimes some linguists still go on arguing on this or the other side. All right, prothesis, preposition, epi, apo, pros, okay, which are some kind of prefix that go before the word to make an additional meaning to the original word. For example, epistrophe and apostrophe, all right, they have different, they are compound words made of different preposition. The root, I mean, the main word is the same, the meaning is different. And the last one, syndesmos, conjunction. You have the copulative conjunction, which is and. So Pablo and Pedro, for example, copulative conjunction, and opposite conjunction. Is it Pablo or Pedro? Which you have a dichotomy, okay, a polarization, this or that. Okay. So I leave you for today with the picture of the canonic list of Mary's Most. And for today, you need to read chapter 4 of Marsico. You will find it on the bibliography there. You have to read it all through the chapter, and you will find some irrelevant information, irrelevant for you, because it's a very accurate text, and it was written for specialists, not for you, maybe for some other kind of public. But anyway, you will find extra information that you don't need, but read it anyway, because you will find the different kind of Mary's Most and some of history of how the discussion end up being that list. And also it will be very useful for your special assignment and to go on with it. And that's it for today. We can call it a day. And remember, if you need some assistance, don't hesitate, and please drop your message into the queries box. All right, see you next time. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.